You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
We talk Jays every week, and why not talk Jays with a former Jay, the man they called Superman, Kevin Pillar. What's up?
That was like a movie trailer introduction, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
You know what your Wikipedia says? It says Kevin Pillar, not to be confused with Kevin Millar. It says that on your Wikipedia.
Well, you know, the great thing about Wikipedia is you can actually edit things on Wikipedia, but I appreciate it because I would imagine there was a lot of confusion early on. I would assume some people, well, I actually know firsthand some people got it confused, but that's an interesting thing to put on Wikipedia. I feel like at this point I've kind of graduated from that. But
I think so. I go there to find those little tidbits, like little nuggets like that. So how did people say your name without having ever heard it? Was it a lot of Pillar?
Pillar, yeah. It's actually kind of interesting because my parents own a hardwood floor business, and they've had it for like 40 years, and it's called Mike Pillar and Sons, but my dad refers to it as Mike Pillar. No, Pillar and Sons. My mom refers to it as Mike Pillar and Sons. So either way, kind of growing up, it was kind of one of those things. Tomato, tomato. I kind of went by both. And, you know, as I got a little bit older, I think Pillar was a little bit more used. I think my parents got on the same page. So I started correcting people a little bit. But in my childhood, it was just one of those things where, oh, okay, Kevin Pillar, that's fine. I'm here, present. Here for class. I'm here.
There must have been a point in your life where you're like, okay, so I'm going to take over the business from dad because I'm one of the sons. At what point did you say, nah, I think I'm going to do something different?
To be honest with you, I never really. I mean, I guess maybe it was always a safety blanket, but I never really. I never really thought about it. I grew up around it. You know, I grew up in a unique household where my mom and dad worked together every single day, and work didn't just stop at work. You know, work came home too. You know, we'd be sitting at the dinner table and they'd be talking about, you know, a customer or, you know, a job or complications on the job or payroll or whatever. And it wasn't always pleasant. It wasn't always like friendly conversations. There was some arguing at the dinner table over work sometimes. And that's just how I grew up. And, you know, I was fortunate to, you know, have parents that own their own business that gave them a lot of freedom, you know, to not miss our events, sports, practice, you know. But I just learned a lot through my parents. They both worked really hard, you know, especially my dad kind of, you know, started that business when he was in his early 20s. And, you know, someone who came from nothing and was able to, you know, kind of establish a successful business in Southern California. I watched how hard he worked, and I watched how many hours he put into work, and, you know, the tedious dedication to, you know, the details of his craft. And it's a big reason why I'm, you know, in the position I'm in is, you know, not only them teaching me about hard work, but me having great role models to look up to when it came to working hard. And, you know, not that they're foreigners, but they live kind of the American dream too. You know, my dad came from nothing. You know, he, you know, was one of 5 kids, shared a bedroom with his 4 brothers, and, you know, rode motorcycles, rode dirt bikes, was a professional motocross rider into his early 20s. And, you know, that didn't pay anything. And he learned hardwood floors on the side as a kind of a trade to really just supplement his riding career. And, you know, at some point he had to put the professional riding aside and try to make something of himself. And, you know, here we are.
What you're telling us, your dad was a badass.
Yeah, my dad, I mean, I grew up riding dirt bikes too. Me and my brother, we would go to the track and race, and we'd go out trail riding. We'd go to the track. I mean, my dad rode dirt bikes up until his, early 50s. And, you know, my dad's 67 now, just had his back fused. I mean, he's in all sorts of physical, he's pretty banged up. Had a lot of surgeries. A lot of that's as a result of dirt biking. But if you were to ask him right now, gun to his head, he'd tell you he'd rather die on that motorcycle than, you know, die in his bed. You know, fortunately for all of us, he's put his riding days behind him. He gets his little fix now because, you know, we have some property here in Texas. my kids have little mini dirt bikes. My nephews have mini dirt bikes, and he still gets to ride them around a little bit. And I think this winter, I think we're going to try to build a little track on the property, and it'll be fun for the kids, but I think it'll be more fun for my dad. And I think we all just worry about his safety, but at least he's
Yeah.
low to the ground on like a little 100. So, I mean, he still is, records supercross and motocross every weekend. Like that is his, love. And, he loves teaching it to his grandkids. So that's a cool thing to have too.
So was it written into your pro contracts you can't ride a dirt bike anymore?
It is in everyone's kind of contract. If you go through the fine print, it doesn't say that you can't do those things. It just says if you're injured on those things, it gives them a reason to void your contract. Um, Obviously, if you remember the story, Madison Bumgarner fell on his dirt bike,
Hmm.
and they did not void his contract. It just says they can void your contract. But I gave up. I honestly gave up riding dirt bikes. Probably when I got into high school. It was kind of a risk reward thing for me at that point. I loved doing it. I had my fair share of, you know, incidences on a motorcycle. Long before Superman arrived, for a nickname, my nickname growing up was Crash. That was like my nickname growing up, and it wasn't because of things I did on a sports field. It was because I had a tendency to be a little bit fearless when it came to, riding a bicycle, a Ranger scooter, a GoPed. I had my fair share of crashes and, going off jumps and ramps. And, when I was growing up, going to a skate park was a cool thing to do. And, I'd get on my rollerblades and go in the half pipe with, no formal training, just kind of figure it out. So we left a lot of those times with a lot of bumps and bruises. And that's kind of how I got the nickname Crash. And, probably long before that, my dad probably would have been Crash too, if someone would have given him a nickname.
You've had two killer nicknames.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong there. At what age, Kevin, is there a point at a certain age or a certain grade where you thought to yourself, this might be a career? Because I'm sure along the entire way, someone's like, okay, how long are you going to try this out for? When are you going to get a real job? At what point did you say, I might be able to make baseball a career?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I get asked it quite a bit, and I've had opportunities to kind of think about that answer in depth, and it's a couple phases. Obviously, as a kid, who doesn't dream about being a big leaguer? Who doesn't dream about doing something kind of crazy? An athlete, astronaut, whatever it might be. We all had those dreams. I had that dream probably, when I was 5 or 6 years old, growing up in LA, listening to Vince Scully. And he was a big part of it too, because his storytelling. And I remember like being a kid and not just watching the game, but listening to Vin. And he would talk
The
about,
best.
he would talk about, he would talk about a guy. I mean, I guess I would call him a kid, but a guy, in his early 20s from Southern California. It wasn't my exact high school, but it could have been a high school that I was familiar with. Grew up in a town nearby to me, and I was like, crap, that could be me. Why not? Why can't that be me? He went to Royal High School in, Agora, and that's one town over from where I was living, and I was like, well, that could be me. There's people, he wasn't a freak athlete. He was a, 6 foot, 180, 200-pound guy. Like, I could grow up to be that size. I'm from that area. It could be me. So when I was a kid, that's kind of how I viewed it, is why not me? The next time I really thought that I could, that it could be more than, a passion and love is probably my freshman year of college. Going into my senior year of high school, I really started to commit myself to playing baseball. Up until that point, I played 3 sports. My senior year, I just played football. I skipped basketball season so I could, because basketball and baseball season, in California overlap a little bit. So I wouldn't get that whole kind of winter time to train, do the baseball stuff. Normally I'd play basketball and I'd jump right into, baseball season. Games were already like going on. So there wasn't a lot of like prep going into it. So that year I skipped basketball. So I really wanted, and at that point, it wasn't pursuing professional aspirations. I was like, I just want to play college baseball. So I did that. My freshman year of college um, is when things really started to click for me. Granted, I didn't go to a big time Division I school. I went to a Division II school, but I was able to come in, earn a spot, not only earn a spot, start, become the best player on my team, become a freshman All American. At that moment, I was like, okay, maybe I am pretty good at baseball. And then the second answer, or the last answer, would be my junior year. I go on this tear. I hit in a 54 game hit streak. I start to become a little bit recognizable. I start to kind of put Division II on the map, myself on the map. I go to play summer ball in the Northwoods League. And, I'm just this kid from Division II, Cal State Dominguez Hill. And I'm surrounded by guys playing at, from Big Five schools, all D1 players. And, that was the kind of the wake up call for me is I belong. Not only do I belong, but in some ways I'm better than a lot of these guys. And I think at that moment I started to realize that, where I'm at and where I came from doesn't matter. At some point I'm going to have to play against the best. And I was playing with the best and against the best. And not only was I holding my own, I was excelling. And, obviously once I got drafted the next year, that summer previously really helped me not kind of have this culture shock of, okay, I'm a 32nd rounder. There's a bunch of first rounders here. It didn't really matter to me at that point because I knew that, where you came from and how you got there really didn't matter. Ball was ball. And I think when I got drafted and that previous summer really was like, I think I can make this a career.
And you made it a hell of a career. You land on a Blue Jays team that until right now, that was the last good run that the Jays had, and you were there. So is there any similarities between the current Blue Jays team and the Jays run you went on with? Because from the outside looking in, I see the team you were on, there were a lot of big egos there. There was a lot of guys who, okay, I don't know if they said, I want the spotlight, but that's kind of what the aura they put off. Well, the current Jays team, complete opposite. Am I getting the right view from the distance on these two teams?
Somewhat. I mean, I think stylistically, two different types of teams. The teams that I were a part of, big time slug, will just kind of punch you in the face in the first couple innings, and then we could kind of cruise to victory. This current team doesn't really slug. They hit for a high average. They have a high on base percentage. They do all the little things right. They run the bases extremely well. As a fan, you're going to tune in to watch all 9 innings because most times it takes 9 innings to win a game. Where it felt like the teams I was on, you could probably turn the TV off in the third or fourth. It was probably 8-0 at some point in the game, and you could just move on with your life and go do something else. But similarities. Back to what you had said. Although there was big egos on the teams that I was a part of, those egos they did a really good job of checking those egos at the door when they showed up. It didn't start that way. A lot of those guys, like I said, big egos, expected big things out of themselves, wanted the spotlight, wanted to be the face of the franchise. As things started rolling, they didn't have to worry about that anymore. They were getting their flowers, but the most important thing was figure out a way to win. And that's, I think, the similarities between the two things is, although the previous teams had bigger egos, I think it would be unfair to say, guys like Vladdy and Bo don't have egos. I think they just do a really good job of checking them at the door. I think George Springer has an ego. I think Max Scherzer has an ego. And I think ego can get misunderstood with aura, confidence, and I think those are good things to have. But when those things are checked at the door and you put winning number one, it's a dangerous thing. And I think that's what both those teams have a lot of similarities to about them. But I think it's also just kind of the feel of the city, the vibe, the way that it's being talked about. I get goosebumps kind of thinking about a couple of turning points in 2015 and it really started with kind of this feel around the stadium, in the stadium, in the city, in the country. And I feel like, being back last week, you're starting to get that feel back
Oh yeah.
where they are the talk of the town. You know, I was a little bit outside the city, downtown area by the stadium. I was in studio a little bit outside, closer to, Yorkville, but still a ton of Blue Jays jerseys around, you know, going in and
Kevin,
out.
it's back. If you go
Yeah.
for an evening walk at night in the summer, and the Jays play essentially every night, and you see the front windows of the homes, everyone has the freaking Jays on right now. Every house you walk by, they're watching Blue Jays baseball, and it has not been that way since the teams you were on. So I can emphatically state, yeah, it's swept the entire country.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I was only back 3 days, but like I was saying, you go into, a clothing store, where you go into a restaurant or a Raba to grab, a couple things. You know, you hear chatter about last night's game or tonight's matchup or what's going on, and it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah.
There's definitely I get a little FOMO when I'm not there and I'm back here, and I had talked about this too. When I had left Toronto, um, my feelings were hurt. I got traded. I loved being there. I thought I was going to be there. Obviously, time heals a lot of things. And I would say for the next couple of years, there was not that I was rooting against the Jays, but there was definitely part of me that was hoping that they wouldn't be successful because, who doesn't want to be part of the last great thing? You want to be remembered. You want to be missed. And as I was able to get away for a while and explore other teams and be other places, time heals a lot of things. And, what I started to realize is, aside from me being selfish thinking that way, it's like that city deserves it so much, whether I'm there or not there. And unfortunately, it took a couple years in between for them to get back, but that city deserves it so much because winning there, I talked about it yesterday. Yeah, I've been a lot of places. I haven't won everywhere I've been, but I've been some other places and had a chance to win. There's still no better place, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, and people may come at me, but I got to say it again. It's my opinion. You can't disagree with someone's opinion, but in my opinion, there's no better place to win than Toronto because of all the things you're talking about.
Yeah.
You walk through the city, everyone's TV is tuned on to it, turned into the game. You walk around the city, there's Blue Jay hats, there's Blue Jay shirts, jerseys. There's kind of this, vibration that you feel throughout the city. There's this magnetic feel that you get when you're winning there. It's like there's no other place like it because it's such a big city, but it's got such a small feel. And when you're in that small little intimate part, kind of around the stadium and the surrounding areas, you feel it. And I was so fortunate to get a chance to feel it. And I think that this team right now is really fortunate that they're getting to feel it because we always talk about home field advantage, which is very important, but home city advantage, there's nothing like it. This is the part of the year where baseball gets tough physically, mentally. You've been at it for 4 or 5 months already, 6 months if you go back to spring training, 7 months if you go back to like when you really started like hitting the gym and the cage and trying to prepare for spring training. It gets tough. Middle of August is, where you can, make a season or lose a season individually and collectively. And when you get to wake up every morning, you go to breakfast in the city, you go certain places, people are so kind. They want to shake your hand, take, photos, or just say, hey, love what you're doing. The city's behind you. You see it, you feel it. There's nothing like it. And these guys are getting to experience that. And there's no greater home city advantage, in my opinion, than playing in Toronto.
My favorite part is that 80% of this Jays roster is a team that these guys at the start of the year, no one had a clue who they were. Didn't know their names, didn't even know how to pronounce a lot of their names. And now they've kind of been thrown into the spotlight because they're the no-name kids. 80% of that team is the no-name kids. So to be in their shoes, they're like, Holy crap, man. Back at the start of the year, I could have shot a cannon down Yonge Street in downtown Toronto, and no one would have known that it was me and I play on the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, I mean, I felt the same way, when I first came up. And, luckily I had a little bit of time in 13 and 14, kind of up and down. Like, not that I was a household name, but at least people knew who my name was. And even in 15, I obviously had a couple moments that kind of took me from maybe not knowing how to pronounce my name to not really knowing who I was or not really caring to kind of, catapult me into like this different universe, with kind of some recognition and some stardom of a couple plays that I was able to make. But to your point, there was a lot of times I could just walk down the street, no one knew who I was. I could be that person who, shot a rocket down the street too, and no one would really even know who it was. And I think a lot of people early on may have experienced that too, and they're not doing that anymore. And I think that's a cool thing that, you're seeing 1 through 26 on this roster have impact. And with impact and with success in that city also comes this face recognition, this, kind of stardom that comes with it. I bet you if you asked any one of those players, they're enjoying it, and there's no other place like it.
Kevin, I have to say, you mentioned some of your great plays in the field, spectacular diving catches, and we used to do the highlights of these catches. And whenever a guy would do, you know what I'm talking about, an unneeded dive, you could tell he timed it so he could dive and make the highlight reel. You never did that. You were always full out. So you must have seen the guys I'm talking about where you're like, he could have ran, he could have caught that on the run, but he did a dive. He wanted a showboat. Did that drive you nuts, or did you even care when you saw that?
I've been obviously, I've been criticized at that at some point in my career. Or a lot.
No,
I
didn't think you did that at all.
I would say, that wasn't my MO. And I think if any, casual person, would come at me with that sort of thing, the wear and tear that it takes on your body, especially in the Rogers Center, to leave your feet is not necessarily worth it when you could stay on your feet. It was never something where it was unnecessary. It was always needed. People have different ways of playing and stuff, but my thing was always play all out all the time.
Yeah,
and,
baby.
And it never felt like, there's occasional times where maybe you go feet first, where, maybe the casual fan could see that as, okay, why do you leave his feet? It was always strategic. When you're going feet first and the ball's coming in, there's a lot of times you feel like, yeah, you could run through it. In my opinion, it's a more difficult play to like run full speed, catch the ball off your shoestrings. Sometimes it looks like you could time it, quote unquote, time it. The sliding just was an easier way to kind of get underneath the ball. I could see where, a fan could say, oh, he shouldn't have left his feet there, but it was never for the ability to.
No, you did it right.
It was never for the ability to, try to find myself on Sports Center or Sportsnet or, to be talked about. To me, it was always about trying to make the plays, trying to help my pitchers out, trying to get outs, and most importantly, try to win. But yeah, there's certain people that do it. Do I sit at home and watch it and cringe? No, outs are outs.
No, you did it the right way.
Guys
you
have
did it
different
the right way.
styles. Yeah, and obviously the Jays recently have just been really spoiled with great outfield play too. Those guys are so fun to watch.
I grew up watching Jesse Barfield, Mosby, and George Bell, the greatest trio, I believe, in Blue Jays history. And they played on that turf. Did you ever attempt to dive on that turf that those guys played on?
No,
Cooker cutter stadiums. I don't know how they survived.
I only got a chance to play in Montreal for those couple of days, which had the old AstroTurf, much like those guys would have played on. In fact, I played in tennis shoes when I played the outfield, but it was one of those things. It was the last 2 games of the spring training exhibition games. and it was just told from the front office to the coaching staff that players, do not leave your feet here. We're so close to the season. And as much as there maybe was one or two opportunities to do it, I knew that it just wasn't worth it at the end. And
wait, so
man,
was that the first time they ever told you during a game, don't dive? If you have to, do not do it.
Yeah, when we were in Montreal, it was just, you're so close to the regular season. You're obviously playing on an unconventional field that none of us have really played on. Not kept up to, the best standards at this point anymore. And it was just so dang hard. And yeah, I mean, it was told just, obviously we're trying to, it's a dress rehearsal. No one's trying to get hurt at that point. We go put on a show for the fans. People haven't seen these are the only times these people in Montreal are going to get baseball in Montreal, these 2 games. And I think we did it like 3 years in a row, but yeah, it was talked about. Don't leave your feet, stay on your feet. It's just not worth it. We're so close to the season. If we went there in the regular season and those games impacted the standings, all that would have gone out the window. But for those 2 exhibition games, stay on your feet. And I give those old school players that had to play on that type of turf, every home game and a lot of games on the road, a lot of credit, because the wear and tear that would have put on your body is next level.
Yeah. Kevin, we've kept you for way too long. I could talk hours about baseball with you. I just wanted to say, you mentioned before how your feelings were hurt when the Jays cast you off, and then you later revisited it, and those feelings went away, and stuff like that's happened in my life. And isn't it great maturing as a human and settling those feelings instead of just carrying around a grudge? Isn't it a great feeling becoming, as I always tell people, I became an adult. Isn't that good?
Yeah, I mean, I like to your point. I think, I think it's okay to have those feelings early on. I think it was more about. It wasn't about what they did. It was more about just my feelings towards where I was at and what I kind of wanted for my career. And I always sit here and say, I mean, it was a blessing in disguise, getting a chance to leave Toronto. I got to play on 9 other teams. I got to experience 9 other cities, 9 other fan bases, but most importantly, 9 different clubhouses. The amount of people that I've now met that I was able to call teammates, that I'm able to call friends now, the amount of different coaching staff that I've been around, that I've taken, little pieces from each of the hitting coaches, each of my outfield coaches, managers, the amount of, baseball knowledge that I've been able to get ever since I left Toronto and got to experience other things has been life-changing. The people that I've met, the people that I've been able to, impact, the people that I've been able to, now call friends is, beyond my wildest imagination. And
gratitude, baby.
And, like I said, I there was obviously animosity towards, the front office at the time. But once that was my first time getting traded. You don't fully kind of understand the business side of baseball. And as you are in the game longer, you understand it's just part of the game. It's not personal. It's just business. And they had a tough decision to make. They made their decision. And, what I learned is life goes on and grudges shouldn't be held. And, everything's water under the bridge. And I'm very fortunate and happy to be kind of welcomed back into, Blue Jay Nation and getting a chance to do stuff like this, stuff on Sportsnet. And it's cool to kind of have this full circle moment come back, and all roads kind of lead back to Toronto for me.
Keep it up, my brother. It's great seeing you on TV. It's great having you back on our TVs here in Canada. Keep up the great work, and go Jays go.
I appreciate it. See you soon.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.